Tonight at 10, a highly critical report by MPs finds that Boris Johnson deliberately and repeatedly misled the House of Commons about lockdown parties. The committee says if the former Prime Minister had not resigned as an MP, it would have recommended a 90-day suspension.
This report, in its depth and its breadth, is a demolition of Boris Johnson's character and his conduct. And let's not beat about the bush on all of this. It concludes he lied.
Boris Johnson called the report the final knife thrust in a protracted political assassination. Also on the programme. A minute's silence in Nottingham city centre this evening as the families of the 3 people stabbed to death pay tribute to their loved ones and thank the huge crowd for their support. The public face of North Korea, the most secretive state in the world, a special report on state crackdowns that are making it even harder for people to survive. And one of our greatest movie actresses, Sir Michael Caine, leads tributes to Glenda Jackson, who has died at the age of 87.
And on BBC London, we hear from the families still looking for answers over the fatal crush outside the Brixton Academy, exactly 6 months on. Join us at 10:30.
Good evening. A highly critical report by a committee of MPs investigating Boris Johnson's claims about lockdown parties has concluded that he deliberately misled the Commons. The Privileges Committee said the former Prime Minister had closed his mind to the truth and committed acts of contempt of Parliament. They said if Boris Johnson had not resigned as an MP, he should have been facing a 90-day suspension from the House of Commons. The group of MPs from all parties, the majority of them Conservatives, pulled no punches. They found that Boris Johnson had repeatedly and deliberately misled MPs in the wake of the Partygate scandal, undermined the democratic process of the Commons, and was complicit in the campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. Boris Johnson called the report's conclusion deranged. Our political editor, Chris Mason, is with me now. Chris.
Sophie, yes, today was about COVID rule-breaking, testimony that said that Boris Johnson's Downing Street, the authors of those COVID restrictions, didn't bother with them themselves. It was an island oasis of normality, said one, as the rest of the country locked down. And yesterday was also about Boris Johnson. But what it was actually about was something else. At the core of all of this, a conversation about the fundamental pillars upon which public life and society at large is built: conduct, behaviour, believability, integrity. Or to put it another way, truth and lies. So many chapters of Boris Johnson's life have his relationship with the truth running straight through them. Today, the latest chapter, a committee of his peers throwing the book at him. Was he honest about what went on in Downing Street during the very COVID restrictions he'd imposed on the rest of us?
All guidance was followed completely during number 10.
Really?
There was no party and that no COVID rules were broken.
A senior civil servant, Sue Gray, investigated. So too the police. Today, another page turns. The conclusion, devastating for Mr. Johnson. Let's be blunt, this report concludes that he lied. It says he deliberately misled MPs, he deliberately misled the committee. He breached their confidence by saying out loud what was in their report before they did, and that he was complicit in a campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. Look at what else the committee had to say. It takes aim at the frequency with which he closed his mind to the truth. And it said some of Mr. Johnson's denials and explanations were so disingenuous that they were deliberate attempts to mislead.
Is this the end, Mr. Johnson?
We're shouting at Boris Johnson because he said no to an interview. He put out a written statement instead, claiming the report is rubbish, a lie, deranged, absurd and complete tripe.
Have you run out of road?
And he said, I do not have the slightest contempt for Parliament or for the important work that should be done by the Privileges Committee. It is for the people of this country to decide who sits in Parliament, not Harriet Harman.
You have been there and seen it with your own eyes.
Harriet Harman is the Labour MP who chaired this investigation. He claims she was prejudiced against him from the outset, given things she had previously said. The report says its members were informed by the facts. Jacob Rees-Mogg was knighted by Boris Johnson and served in his cabinet. What did he make of the report?
Well, I think it's overbaked. That I think they want to find the worst at every possible opportunity. And I think it shows a degree of vindictiveness that does not work to the committee's favour or advantage.
Is this the end for Boris Johnson? No way back from this, is there?
There's easily a way back, because the great virtue of our system is that Parliament can chuck you out, and it can chuck you out again, and it can suspend you, but if your voters send you back, back you come.
Today's report came out at 9 a.m, but the Prime Minister managed to find himself in front of the cameras earlier than that, wanting to look like he's getting on with the job on an immigration raid in West London.
You're talking about a report that I haven't seen and no one else has seen. It wouldn't be right to comment on it in advance of it coming out and being published.
So he didn't fancy saying very much, but little tongue-tie from the opposition parties today.
Boris Johnson is not only a lawbreaker but a liar. He's not fit for public office and he's disgraced himself and continues to act like a, pound shop Trump in the way in which he tries to discredit anybody who criticises his actions.
He's built his entire career as a politician on being very shady with the truth, and what the committee has found is that he purposely lied to Parliament as Prime Minister.
Today, the final page turns on the former Prime Minister, COVID rule breaking and the truth. The big question is whether the book is now closed for good on Boris Johnson.
Well, Chris is with me now, and that is the question. Is the book closed? Is the political story for Boris Johnson over?
That is the live conversation that is going on tonight amongst Conservative MPs as they weigh up the gravity of the conclusions of this report. Because the curiosity today was that today was shorn of its main element of jeopardy that we were anticipating with this publication of the report, expected to be the thing that would map out Boris Johnson's future. But because he'd raced ahead to announce that he would leave Parliament, having seen a copy of the report himself a couple of days ago, we knew that any sanction that they talked about would have a gravity because of its scale, but beyond that it wouldn't have a direct impact. And yet such were the words, and indeed that suggested sanctions, so big were they, that they have prompted one heck of a conversation amongst Conservative MPs. I'll just give you a quick insight into some of the texts that I've had tonight. A minister texting me say, I do think people who think Boris is immortal are either paranoid or bananas. A couple of other conversations. One former cabinet minister saying that they felt that Boris Johnson, and this is someone who would be warm about Boris Johnson in the past, thrown away an image of being fun and witty, and now in their view was nasty and bitter. But some of those loyal to Mr Johnson saying this was a posturing Parliament at its worst and a mythology was building. On Monday, MPs will take a look at this. The expectation is I think they'll probably back what the report suggests. That's not the end of the story, though. By-elections in Uxbridge and in Selby and Ainsty in North Yorkshire coming up in just over a month.
Chris Mason, our political editor. Thank you. Thousands of people have attended a vigil for the victims of the attacks in Nottingham city centre in the early hours of Tuesday morning. The families of the victims who died all addressed the huge crowd after a minute's silence. Police have been given more time to question a 31-year-old man who was arrested on suspicion of murder. It emerged today that he was a former student at the University of Nottingham. Our Midlands correspondent Navtesh Johal was at the vigil.
Silent, defiant, united. The people of Nottingham chose to stand together in pain and love. For the first time since the tragic events of Tuesday, at this vigil we heard from all three families of those who died. Starting with James Coates, one of school caretaker Ian Coates' three sons.
It feels like he's touched a lot of hearts over the years, more than what we assumed and knew that he had. So it's been really nice and heartwarming to see the messages and the people come out and talk about how he was when they were younger and how he's helped them. Some beautiful comments. My dad was an avid fisherman, he loved his family, and he also loved his forest. You Reds. You Reds. You Reds.
After hearing from the fathers of 19-year-olds Barney Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar the day before, it was the turn of their mums to remember their children.
He loved pesto pasta, but he hated cottage pie. He was obsessed with aeroplanes, and he still carried the dream of being a pilot in the RAF one day.
She also had a message for the crowd about the attacker.
He is just a person. Please hold no hate that relates to any colour, sex, or religion. I know silence is the traditional sign to show respect, and we've had that rightly so tonight. Can I just ask for you to do one more thing, to show us an enormous roar and round of applause for everyone affected by this tragedy.
She was a treasured and adored child. She wanted very few things in life. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to have fun, because that's what all students want. They want to enjoy themselves. And all they were doing was walking home. They were just walking home after a night out.
Grace wasn't only just a sister to me. She was a best friend of mine, my mother, my father, all her friends. And if there's only one message that comes out of this, I urge you all to cherish every moment you spend with your loved ones, as you just never know when it will end. Thank you.
Sophie, there will be people watching at home wondering, just like they were here a few hours ago, how did those families, amid their grief, find the strength to speak so beautifully and powerfully in front of thousands of people? And I must make a special mention of Grace O'Malley Kumar's little brother, a young man who showed tremendous courage. And after hearing him speak, there were many who left here feeling inspired by his example.
Navtesh Johal in Nottingham. Thank you. Up to 600 people could be missing after a fishing boat carrying migrants sank off southern Greece on Tuesday. Doctors treating survivors say up to 100 children may have been on board, huddled in the ship's hold. At least 79 people are known to have died. More than 100 have been rescued. Our Europe correspondent Nick Beek is in Kalamata in Greece, where survivors have been taken. Nick.
Well, tonight, Sophie, there have been some protests against the government's handling of this crisis. But the truth is, their tougher approach to migration has proved popular among the public over the last couple of years. Clearly, though, there is a human impact to it. Now, the Coast Guard are maintaining that when they offered help to the migrants, that help was rejected. But lots of people are saying that if you can see a boat is so overcrowded and in such deep waters, there is a moral obligation to intervene. Relatives of the hundreds lost at sea rushed to this port city, fearing the worst. We found Aftab from Wolverhampton, searching for news about his cousins from Pakistan.
My relatives were on the boat that capsized.
How do you know that?
We've had confirmation that we found one of the relatives is in there, but the rest of them we haven't got hold of yet.
How many relatives?
There's 4 of them.
The victims of Greece's worst ever migrant shipwreck had set off from Libya. Many Syrians were on board, Qasim Abu Zaid told me, including his wife.
شو بتقول مشاعره؟ أكيد مشاعر ما في مشاعر تحكي.
like, how would I feel? I lost my wife now. I don't know where is she now. So of course, it's my wife.
21-year-old Isra Ahun had been unable to find a legal route to join her husband in Germany. This evening, we went to meet Dr. Makaris. He treated 30 of the survivors, who told him dozens of children had been on board.
They told us that there were children in the bottom of the ship, children and women. One told me about 100 children, the other told me about 50.
Lots of children.
Lots of children.
Hanging over this tragedy is one simple question. Should the Greek authorities have done more to save those on board? The Coast Guard says the migrants didn't want their help, a claim that's been challenged. So we've been trying to piece together exactly what happened in this disaster that seemed to unfold in slow motion. At around 8 a.m. on Tuesday, the Greek authorities are first informed about the fishing vessel. The Coast Guard has first contact at 11 a.m. and claims it doesn't request assistance. A little later, an emergency helpline for migrants in trouble at sea receives multiple distress calls, including one at 3:20 p.m. saying the captain has left the vessel. The migrant boat has no publicly available tracking data, but BBC Verify has used a ship monitoring website to follow the movements of boats in the area that offered assistance. At 3 p.m, Greece sends a nearby commercial vessel, the Lucky Sailor, to the migrant boat, supplying it with food and water. Tuesday evening, a Coast Guard vessel sails near the fishing boat and from a distance apparently concludes there was no problem with its navigation. But less than 4 hours later, the migrant boat overturns and sinks. The Greek authorities, as well as fending off criticism, have been making arrests, up to a dozen. But who was really to blame for such a huge loss of life is being fiercely debated. Nick Beak, BBC News, in southern Greece.
The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, the former Prime Minister, David Cameron, and England's Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty, are among senior advisers and politicians who will give evidence to the UK's COVID-19 inquiry next week. The first stage of the inquiry is currently looking at the UK's preparations for a pandemic, including whether officials were too focused on the idea that the next pandemic would be flu. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, is with me now. Big names, they're certainly getting down to business fast.
Yes, Sophie, a really heavyweight cast list next week. Now, David Cameron and George Osborne, I think, will be asked about their term in office, 2010 to 2016. What did they know about pandemic planning then? Did they give enough resources to the NHS to be resilient? Jeremy Hunt, now Chancellor, of course, he was Health Secretary covering England for 6 years, from 2012. There was a big pandemic planning exercise on his watch, which assumed it would be flu, and it showed the whole thing coming under severe strain under those scenarios. Then there's Oliver Dowden, now Deputy Prime Minister. He was Cabinet Office Minister for a couple of years immediately before the pandemic. He'll be a witness as well. And of course, Sir Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance, very well known during the whole coronavirus saga, but they held senior jobs before that as well. And I think a key thing here is that families of the bereaved tell us they want to know what more could have been done to prevent all this. Was the UK adequately prepared? And one witness today, a former senior civil servant involved in contingency planning, said he thought overall preparedness for the pandemic was inadequate.
Hugh, thank you. Now, we've heard a lot in recent weeks about artificial intelligence, computers starting to act and respond almost as if they are human. AI is developing fast and it's transforming many aspects of modern life. But there have been warnings from some of the founding engineers of the technology that it could be used for malicious purposes. Now, though, one of the so-called godfathers of AI has told the BBC that he isn't so worried. Our technology editor, Zoe Kleinman, can tell us more.
The person pouring the cold water on the greatest fears surrounding artificial intelligence is Professor Yann LeCun, head of AI at Facebook's owner Meta. Speaking in Paris, he said, the scenario we're going to turn on the computer and immediately it's going to take over the world, that's just preposterously ridiculous. The fear is that the technology is evolving very rapidly and could put many people out of a job. He said it would change work, but said it's going to create shifts in professions. A lot will disappear, but a lot of them are going to appear. The same way 20 years ago you couldn't imagine a YouTuber making a living. He also thinks it's highly unlikely that AI systems will be more intelligent than humans anytime soon. Professor Lekern's words are a sharp contrast to those of the other two men he worked with on the science that underpins modern AI. Dr. Geoffrey Hinton retired recently and he said he regretted his life's work. Professor Yoshua Bengio said he worries about bad actors misusing the tech. Both academics and the companies building AI agree that regulation is the best way to try to maximise its benefits and minimise the risks. ChatGPT, for example, was unheard of this time last year. Jan Lekern is confident that AI will be a useful tool rather than a master, and he heralded a new renaissance for humanity. ChatGPT couldn't have put it better. Zoe Kleinman, BBC News.
North Korea is the most secretive state in the world. Its borders have been sealed for more than 3 years now, making it impossible to know what is happening there. Over the past 6 months, the BBC has been secretly communicating with 3 people inside North Korea with the help of an organisation called Daily NK, which has a network of sources. Last night, we heard stories about people who are starving to death because food is so scarce. Tonight, we hear how the state crackdowns are making it even harder for people to survive. Because we can't identify the 3 people we've been talking to, we have used animations and actors to speak their words. Our Seoul correspondent Jean Mackenzie reports.
This is the world's most tyrannical state. Its supreme leader rules by terror. But Kim Jong-un is tightening his grip, pushing his people to their limits.
Every day it gets harder to live. One wrong move and you're facing execution.
This is Chan Ho, one of 3 North Koreans who've risked their lives to tell us what's been happening since the country cut itself off from the world. We've changed their names and illustrated their words using actors and animations.
If I live according to the rules, I feel like I'll starve to death. But just by trying to survive, I could be arrested by the state security, branded as a traitor, and killed.
One way to survive North Korea is to escape across the border to China. But Kim Jong-un has begun walling his people in, installing fences and surveillance cameras. Guards have been ordered to shoot anyone attempting to cross. Myung-suk is a market trader living close to the border.
The government strictly controls the border, using COVID as an excuse. But really, it's to stop the smuggling and people crossing the river to China. If you even approach the river, you'll be given a harsh punishment. There's almost nobody crossing now.
Those who dare to try now gamble with their lives.
A friend's son told me about several closed-door executions he saw. Each time, 3 to 4 people would be executed. The crime was trying to escape. People are stuck here and waiting to die.
Sealing the border has also allowed Kim Jong-un to shut out the thing he fears the most: foreign films and TV programs. These are the only way North Koreans can learn about the prosperous world outside their borders. South Korean videos pose the biggest threat. Those who share them can now be executed. This propaganda video shows people being publicly punished.
I was taken in for questioning. I'm more afraid of people now.
Ji-yoon told us many of her friends and their children have also been interrogated.
At a court in Pyongyang, the local leaders were gathered to judge a 22-year-old man in a public trial. He'd gone around spreading South Korean songs and films. His punishment was 10 years and 3 months in hard labor camp. Before 2020, this would have been a quiet trial with perhaps 1 year in prison. People were shocked.
We've brought our interviews to the UN team that investigates human rights in North Korea.
Wow. Okay. It's quite sobering. You shouldn't be reprimanded, let alone jailed or even executed for consuming foreign media. They are very serious violations of human rights, and in fact, in the past, the Commission of Inquiry of the UN has said that these can, in many cases, amount to crimes against humanity.
But amidst the fear, there are small signs that people's loyalty to the regime is waning.
Before COVID, people viewed Kim Jong-un positively. We hoped perhaps that he'd rule in a new way. But now almost everybody is full of discontent.
Nobody believes the propaganda on TV. The state says we are nestling in a mother's bosom. But what kind of mother would execute their child in broad daylight for running to China because they were starving?
At one of the hardest times in North Korea's history, the state is closing in on every front. People have nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Jean Mackenzie, BBC News.
Well, we put our findings to the North Korean government. Its embassy in London said that the information collected isn't entirely factual, as it's derived from fabricated testimonies from anti-democratic People's Republic of Korea forces. It has always prioritised the interests of the people, even at difficult times, it said, and has an unwavering commitment to the well-being of the people. The Oscar-winning actress Glenda Jackson, who went on to become a Labour MP, has died at the age of 87. She started out in acting in the 1950s on stage and screen before quitting to take up politics as the MP for Hampstead, declaring that an actor's life is not interesting. But she did go back to it in later life, and today Sir Michael Caine described her as one of our greatest movie actresses. David Sillito looks back at her life.
If that is your opinion, you had better hide your face indeed.
Your Majesty has only to say.
I have said!
1971. Glenda Jackson, Elizabeth R. A mesmerising 9-hour life of Queen Elizabeth I.
I am a woman. You have wives, you have children, you know what it is to love and be loved.
That same year, she won an Oscar for Women in Love.
You don't think one needs the experience of having been married?
I don't want us to live like this.
It was also the year of Sunday Bloody Sunday.
Shall we try that?
Which brought another Oscar nomination.
Darling, you couldn't do it. You must be hungry for something.
That's true. And on Christmas Day, she wrapped it all up as the star turned on Morecambe and Wise. The daughter of a builder and a cleaner from Birkenhead, who'd grown up in a 2 up, 2 down, was at the very pinnacle of the acting world.
How was it for you? Very nice.
She was nominated for an Oscar 4 times, but was always too busy to actually attend. Acting was, she said, a serious job for a serious person, and she brought much of that spirit to her 23 years as an MP. She was briefly a transport minister in Tony Blair's first government, but her politics were very much rooted in the passions and values of old Labour.
No care for the weaker. Rumble thy belly full!
And then, in her 70s, an honour-strewn return to acting.
They all think they can treat me like this.
Her death comes just weeks after finishing her final film alongside Sir Michael Caine. It was, he said, as wonderful an experience this time as it was on their first film together 50 years ago. I shall miss her.
This is our home, all this.
Glenda Jackson. From Elizabeth to Lear. On stage and screen. Regal, commanding, funny, serious, moving.
Glenda Jackson, who has died at the age of 87. Time now for a look at the weather. Stav Danaos is with me in a rather beautiful sunset.
Isn't it gorgeous, Sophie? Yeah, more of that to come, but we've got some changes to the weather as well. Good evening to you. Low pressure is starting to edge ever closer to our shores. That's going to bring showers, even longer spells of thundery rain over the weekend. Could do with some more rain. It's been so dry and so sunny of late. This is the area of low pressure I'm talking about, slowly edging towards us, sending a few weather fronts out tonight. We could even see a couple of showers or thunderstorms arrive across Cornwall, maybe Devon as well. But most places will be dry, the odd mist patch here and there, clear skies. Temperatures dipping into single digits, parts of northeast England, northeast Scotland again. It's quite cool there, but for most it's going to be mild. We start off with the sunshine tomorrow morning. Any mist patches clear away. Could have showers from the word go across Cornwall, Devon. These becoming more widespread across Wales, Northern Ireland, parts of west and southwest Scotland. Maybe the Isle of Man as well into the afternoon period. But much of the country, central and east areas, will stay dry. Lots of sunshine. Could be up to 26, 27, maybe 28 degrees once again. Now, for the weekend, it looks like we'll start to see more showers, even longer spells of rain. It'll still be on the warm side, particularly when we get the sunny spells, not as hot as it has been. So this is Saturday's picture then. Most of the showers and thunderstorms will be out west. A few could affect the southeast. Some low cloud murk affecting some eastern coastal areas of England and also northeast Scotland. But there will be a lot of sunshine towards the east. Again, a warm day, 25, maybe 26 degrees, a little bit cooler further west. Sunday, there will be more cloud around, the chance of some thundery rain across southern Britain, spreading its way northwards as we go through the day on Sunday. So some areas really could be quite wet. So because of more cloud, more showers around Sunday, not quite as warm, still above the seasonal norm, generally 20 to 23 degrees. And then into next week, low pressure always nearby to the west of us, so plenty of showers around, particularly to the north and the west, but there's signs of it starting to turn sunny and warmer again across England and Wales towards the end of the week. Stay tuned. See you later. Sophie.
Stav, thank you very much. And that's it from the BBC News at 10. There's more on the day's main stories on Newsnight with Victoria Derbyshire, which is just about to get underway over on BBC Two. The news, though, continues here on BBC One. It's time now for the news where you are. From the news team at 10, it's goodbye.